the war. Quick note, if you have not seen my video on the first 7 episodes of the Volume 5 rewrite, stop right now, go watch it, and then come back here. Done? Okay, good, let's go. So last time on Dragon Ball Z, we left off with Catgirl defeating the evil furry cultists, recruiting her lesbian chameleon friend to her side. Meanwhile, in Discount Chinatown, our heroes found their house of wreck from the Cowardly Lion's rave. Now our useless farm child is in the hands of said stupid lion being held hostage, and said lion has ordered Little Red and her dumb friends to Haven School for human shields without their weapons to help decorate the campus for Christmas. With their intestines. Anyways, let's just jump right into chapter 8, shall we? The episode opens in the Ranger house at nightfall. Crow's just gone over the plan with everyone, and it's clear everyone has their weapons on them before they set out for Haven Academy. Crow then asks where Ruby is, and he's clearly super fucking stressed because his boss just got kidnapped and a child might be murdered. Weiss offers to go get her, only to back down when Yang asserts that she'll handle this, and she affirms to Weiss that she knows what to do and isn't gonna go yelling and punching things to solve her problems like usual. Downstairs, Ruby is practicing some combat maneuvers without her scythe. She trips up a bit and then chastises herself, stopping to look at the little rack of swords where she and Oscar had their last conversation, before she left and he got, kidnapped. And she is clearly worried for the farm child, as we all are. Yang heads down to ask Ruby if she's ready to go, and Ruby pretends that she's fine, grabbing Crescent Rose and makes her way to the stairs. Yang grabs her hand to stop her because we need a dramatic moment, and tells Ruby that everything is going to be okay. Ruby stops for a moment, then looks back and smiles, saying that it's nice to hear that coming from Yang again after so long, because, she's been kind of a bitch.
Don't tell me to calm down!
Meanwhile, Cinder, Emerald, Mercury, and Vernal wait for Leo and Raven in the hall outside the headmaster's office, and once they exit, Leo and Raven, I mean. Leo confirms that Crow has just texted him that his group has arrived on campus. Cinder is antsy for the hero's arrival, especially Ruby, because murder. Emerald, however, finds it odd that they'd agree to come to the school on Leo's mention of news from the council, as the villains aren't being kept completely in the loop by Leo. Cinder tells Leo and Raven to go on, reminding them that they have 5 minutes. Cue an anxious glance between Raven and Vernal. We then cut to the courtyards of Haven Academy during the full moon. To recap, Crow, Ruby, Weiss, Yang, Jean, Ren, and Nora are present and making their way for the atrium, where all the main offices, along with Leo's office, are found. It's basically the most boring building on campus, because if you want to hide some ancient artifact or something evil, you must hide it within something boring. Here they still have their weapons, and Ruby looks up at the CCT tower before continuing on with everyone else. A little moment for her to go like, oh god, I hope this isn't Beacon all over again. Once they reach the steps before the building, they look around and see no sign of anyone outside the atrium. Weiss kneels down and summons a teeny tiny version of the Armagigas. Crow asks everyone if they're ready, and they all nod yes. Once they're inside, it is very clear that none of them have their weapons, and Leo awaits them on the platform atop the statue of Jin. People were like, oh, why'd you call it a goddess statue? Jin isn't a goddess. You know what the fuck I meant. You know what the fuck I meant. He welcomes them, like a shitbag, only for Crow to cut him off and ask how long he's been with Salem, asserting that he's well aware that Leo had a direct hand in the killings of nearly all of Mistral's huntsmen and huntresses, some of which were their closest friends, because Leo is a piece of shit. Raven's voice echoes as she asserts that Leo did what he had to in order to survive. Everyone is startled as Raven, wearing her mask, drops down from the rafters. I felt it was more dramatic than, the bird thing. I wanted to keep that if you're gonna shoot me thing in, but none of them have their weapons, so I had to cut it, and I'm sad about that. Crow makes it very clear that unless Raven is here because she had a sudden change of heart, she can save whatever she has to say. Raven simply chides Crow for pathetically believing in Ozpin and dragging children into this futile war, only for Yang to roll her eyes and comment on how Raven now seems to be under Salem's wing herself, having no room to talk whatsoever. Raven quips back that she had no choice if she wanted to survive, and that she chose the winning side. Ruby steps up and, hopefully in a speech more fitting and less annoying than her original one from back in the original episode, she tries to appeal to Raven's ethics. Raven used to be a huntress on a team with her parents and Crow, and she had to believe in protecting humanity from Salem at some point. Ruby begs Raven to reconsider whether she has options and asserts that she still does have a choice. Slowly, Raven removes her mask and looks remorseful.
You sound just like your mother.
And right then, she opens the portal and a massive barrage of fire shoots out immediately, not just one teeny tiny fireball. Everyone dodges with Yang pushing RWBY out of the way. Cinder, Emerald, Mercury, and Vernal emerge from the portal, surrounding the heroes on all sides. And just when it couldn't look any worse, Adam enters the building, with us hearing "Hope I'm not too late" before we actually see him. And Yang is just crying inside like, oh god, no. Cue handshake. Adam simply says he's having Hazel look over the White Fang operations outside, so he'll get to have all the fun. We briefly cut to Hazel outside, overseeing the Fang members. One of them makes a comment on their frustration in their leader leaving them in the command of a human, though they shut up when Hazel looms over them. They apologize in fear, but Hazel simply says he doesn't want any unneeded bloodshed before telling them to finish their operations and planning the charges. Another Fang member approaches and informs Hazel that everything both in Haven and throughout the city of Mistral is in place. Back inside, the villains have surrounded the heroes, who seem totally defenseless. And right there, Weiss shouts, "Now!" Immediately, her full-sized Armageddon, the Night Summon, barges in from the side of the atrium, having been crouched and holding everyone's weapons in its hands. It rushes through, forcing the villains back, and drops the weapons, and the heroes rush to retrieve them. But not all is well, as one use of Adam's Moonslice semblance is enough to destroy the summon in one blow. He sets his sights on Weiss, saying that it looks like he'll finally get to kill a Shni after all. He rushes at her and Yang tries to help, only for Adam to relish in the fact he'll be able to kill off two of his targets at once, and rubbing in Blake running away to further mess with Yang's head. The other fights ensue as Cinder charges at RWBY, only for Jean to block her path again. Immediately infuriated, Cinder decides to take her anger out on killing Jean first, and making it very slow and painful. RWBY tries to help him, only for Emerald to send her flying up onto the rafters above. Emerald tells Cinder that the silver eyes aren't something to mess with, and begrudgingly Cinder agrees. And so Emerald and Mercury go to keep RWBY busy and away from Cinder at all costs, and this environment up on the rafters makes it very difficult for RWBY to use Crescent Rose properly. During this fight, Emerald's hallucination semblance keys RWBY into her powers, and when she realizes Emerald is the one who made Pyrrha kill Penny, she goes ballistic and does not hold back. Crow meanwhile takes on Raven, and while Crow's bad luck does give him the upper hand at points, Raven reminds him that his bad luck is contagious, alluding to all the other fights around him, and this manages to unnerve Crow a bit, with Raven chiding him for being sentimental. Take a shot every time Raven chides Crow, honestly. And our last big fight is Ren and Nora against Vernal. While there isn't really any personal beef between them, it kinda signals that Vernal isn't a big player in the grand scheme. And plus I figured it'd be cool seeing Ren and Vernal clash with how fast they are in their fighting styles. Ren and Nora also notice, however, that Vernal isn't using any of the maiden powers Cinder has been using. Foreshadowing, perhaps? During all of this, Leo simply watches the fights in shame of what he's done. There's either a brief flashback or just lines Leo hears in his head, with back and forth between himself and Salem, where Leo admits he knows Salem is invincible and that they're only delaying the inevitable, and swearing his allegiance to her. Caught up in guilt, he simply leaves the atrium for the hallway to his office, because he's a dick. The fights are what take up a good chunk of the episode, and we see little bits of each one. Though it's clear that while Weiss is managing to hold her own against Adam, with Adam making occasional comments about the Shni family and the shit he had to endure, alluding to perhaps a scar, Yang keeps hesitating, with Weiss having to save her routinely. Eventually, this results in Weiss getting caught in another of Adam's moon slices, resulting in her being lethally injured. The moment this happens, Yang stops and, flashing back to Blake screaming as she stabbed the Knight of the Fallen Beacon, screams herself, catching everyone in the atrium off guard. Perhaps the scream can happen once the screen goes black, after focusing on an unconscious, heavily bleeding Weiss and Yang's eyes as she freaks out. I'm not sure, but y'all get the point. It's drama. Now, I want to point out that for the Battle of Haven, each episode in the second half is going to have only one or two major focuses. Last episode was beginning this clusterfuck, with the heroes arriving and initially clashing and ending with a huge trauma. This episode is going to be focusing on Oscar and Ozpin during their captivity while all this fighting is going on. It actually starts back in the house right after Oscar made his dinner in Chapter 6. Oscar gets the feeling that he's being watched, and Oz agrees that something doesn't quite feel right. Oscar looks around the house, occasionally hearing footsteps and catching glimpses of some shadowy figure. Now, I had a plot point that Leo rented out the house for Team Ranger initially, and that he'd bugged it so he could keep an eye on them, but he never told this to Salem or her other cronies. In some tense way of Oscar coming across one of these cameras, he's immediately attacked by Leo, his cane knocked from his hand. Oscar at first tries to fight back, but Leo is far too skilled a huntsman for him, because, you know, he is a headmaster. Though when he tries to escape, Leo unleashes a brutal earth dust attack and knocks Oscar right out before he can reach the door. Oscar wakes up towards the end of Leo and Raven's conversation in his office during the More the Merrier. As he wakes up, and perhaps while the screen is black, we hear little tidbits of this conversation, and it's made clear Leo and Raven have some sort of plan for them to all escape from Salem harm-free. Before they can say any more, Raven and Leo take notice of Oscar's awakening, and Raven quickly shushes him and tells him to keep quiet if he wants to stay safe. Raven simply says, "Hey Oz," before she and Leo leave the room, and Oscar, his head hurting, simply falls back asleep. Oscar awakens to find Leo crying to himself at his desk as he packs his things. Oscar asks Leo why he turned against Ozpin, and Leo reveals how he and Oz met back at Beacon Academy, and how Leo loved Vale and its accepting culture. When Leo was named headmaster of Haven Academy, however, it was at Ozpin's behest once he became Beacon's headmaster, with a slight majority vote of the Mistral Council approving the decision. This, along with protecting the Spring Maiden and the Relic of Knowledge, was meant to try and promote positive human-faunus relations in Mistral, only for nearly half the Mistral Council to quietly resent Leo, and nearly half the people of Mistral and even his students flat out despising and mocking him. This is also why Leo tends to hide his tail in his coat. He barely goes out into the city of Mistral, and whenever he does, he is sure to cover his face and tail. Eventually, Leo reached a breaking point once he'd learned Ozpin had been lying to him, and that there was no way to truly stop Salem, and that while he regrets what he's done, he had no other choice. Before Oscar can say anything else, Ozpin tells Oscar he would like to have a word with Leo in private, and the moment Oz forcefully takes over, we cut to black. Oscar finds himself again in his mindscape, only for Ozpin to be completely absent. At first, he's not sure that he's in his mindscape, as he's back home in his bedroom, though weirdly enough, he's young, finding himself watching some rounds of the Vital Festival tournament, the light of his scroll slightly glowing beneath his covers. Oscar goes downstairs and outside to look around, only for his Aunt Dorothy to confront him about leaving with just a letter and nothing else, as Oscar returns to normal. Dorothy goes on a rant of how Oscar's parents threw their lives away to become a huntsman and huntress, only to die and leave Oscar orphaned. Oscar tries to snap back and say that he has no other choice, but then runs off and heads for Mistral. Once on his journey through the forest, Oscar finds himself unsure of what's actually going on, or what's real or not. He looks at his reflection in a nearby pond, where he sees his naturally green eyes slowly turn the same brown as Ozpin's, and this unnerves him. He touches the water, and immediately is startled when he hears a hum coming from deeper in the forest. He follows it and sees glimpses of a blonde woman in the distance. He rushes to ask her if she knows anything, only for her to disappear into thin air. Right then he hears Salem mutter Ozma hatefully, and finds her staring him down amongst the trees, her hair down and without any of the usual dark veins visible. You can guess which shot this is meant to mimic.
Mommy?
She attacks with a blast of red light, leaving Oscar terribly hurt and wounded. She pins him to the ground as he heavily bleeds from a mortal wound, says,
We finally had freedom.
and then proceeds to burn Oscar alive.
Hi.
Because that's how you deal with your problems healthily as a couple. We then cut to Oscar awakening, finding himself mid-battle with Leo. Realizing Ozpin's probably exhausted himself and is resting his soul, Oscar rushes to escape and bursts into the atrium. Crow spots this and calls for Oz, only for Hazel, who has entered the atrium at the same time, to scream Ozpin's name as the screen cuts to black. Today is being so rude. Like, first it's pouring down rain, and I gotta go get food in it, and the wind is howling, and if you hear it, that's nature's fault. And then my leftovers get eaten, when the person who ate them doesn't even like the leftovers from the restaurant they're from. And then my fucking light bulb burns out. It's... Why, God? Why? Okay, anyway, let's just continue. The episode opens right after Weiss's injury. Adam prepares to finish Yang off, only for Raven to rush in and warn him to back off. Intimidated, Adam decides to go check on the White Fang operations outside, silently shitting himself, and to send Hazel back in to help the other villains in cleanup. Once Adam leaves, Crow rushes over to look after Weiss and assess her injuries, with Yang unsure of what to do or how to react to any of this. The others are also concerned, but continue their fights, though it's incredibly difficult for both Ruby and Jean. Cinder takes advantage of this to try and kill Jean, but Ruby rushes in when she finds an opening, most likely with her semblance, which, she remembers to use, to knock Cinder to the side. I swear to God, if my dog starts freaking out as I'm recording this, I'm going to lose my mind. While Ruby keeps Cinder busy, Jean rushes over to Weiss out of concern. Ruby and Cinder clash for a bit, with Ren and Nora holding Emerald and Mercury back. Cinder tries to, not able to kill Ruby, but deciding to murder the people she loves, take out Weiss and everyone standing around her in one blow, but Ruby's silver eyes immediately go off and stop her. Emerald manages to knock Ruby out during this, but it leaves Cinder incredibly exhausted, clutching her big dumb poofy sleeve. Everyone's in awe of the light Ruby's eyes just released, including Raven and Vernal, who stand in the center of the room, whispering about where the fuck Leo is and their plan to get into the vault. And that's when Hazel enters right as Crow shouts Oz's name as Oscar arrives. Hazel goes berserk and, injecting himself with lightning dust crystals, charges at Oscar, and Crow rushes to protect him. Ren runs over to help Jean tend to Weiss, as Nora carries Ruby over near them to protect her. Leo enters the room and witnesses the chaos unfolding, but before he can react, Raven tells Leo to open the path to the vault. Leo does so, though when the lift is lowered, Cinder, having partially recovered, demands to go with them, and reluctantly, Raven agrees. And so Raven, Vernal, and Cinder, the magnificent bitch trio, head down into the vault's chamber. Good fucking riddance. Down the garbage chute with you! Yang attempts to go after them, only for Emerald and Mercury to block her path, while Leo joins Hazel in fighting Crow and Oscar, and these are the two main fights of this episode. During this, we get the elevator scene between the three bitches extraordinaire, though Cinder instead opts to tell the tale of the original Spring Maiden who adored nature and was the most graceful and kind of her sisters, mocking Vernal for not fitting the bill at all. Raven makes a jab at the cursed Fall Maiden, which makes Cinder scowl. For the record, this kind of fits into an origin story I had for Ozma and Salem's Daughters, but it's honestly not all that relevant considering this involves mostly intact Volume 6. I just wanted to share it because please care about the things I have to say, please. Cutting back upstairs, Ruby awakens to the madness unfolding in the atrium. While she goes to help Oscar against Hazel, wanting to kick some fucking ass for hurting the lovely Snow Queen, Nora helps Yang against Emerald and Mercury. The fights continue, though right as Hazel's about to strike Ruby, Yang steps in and activates her semblance. Now, I wrote this before they had the big return of her semblance in Volume 6 against Adam, so I'm not sure if I'm gonna keep this, but yeah, it's here for now. Preferably set to a reprise of Ignite. With this, Yang takes on Hazel, giving Oscar some time to breathe, and Ruby joins Nora in fighting Emerald and Mercury. There's a lot of switching going on. And during all of this madness, Jean and Ren are still struggling to stop Weiss's bleeding. Maybe huntsmen and huntresses should just carry first aid tools on them at all times. Then, recalling Pierre's mention of him having an immense amount of aura, Jean gets an idea and begins using it to amplify Weiss's. And the scene ends on her gasping for air. So this way, Jean actually gets an idea and uses it, instead of it just randomly happening. I mean, there's still a lot of stress going on, obviously, but Back in the vault chamber, Cinder explains that the door to the Vault of Knowledge will only open when the Spring Maiden touches it. Raven dons her mask as Vernal approaches, though before Raven can strike, Cinder freezes her in place and attacks Vernal. She reveals her grim arm as she rips through Vernal's aura and digs her claws into her stomach. Vernal screams as Raven breaks free from the ice, only for Cinder to realize she's made a grim error.
Because Vernal isn't the Spring Maiden. I am!
God damn it, Barb!
Now, as I've been looking over all of this, I have toyed with the idea of moving Blake's plot to Mistral instead of Menagerie, mainly since Mistral needs more exploration during Volume 5, and while I tried integrating it more into Team Ranger's story, I feel having Blake's story set here as well could do it more justice. However, for now, we're just gonna work with Blake's story having been set in Menagerie up until this point. Okay? Okay. The episode opens with Blake, Gira, Kali, Sun, and Ilya, along with all the volunteers from Menagerie for the Faunus Militia, arriving at the Mistral docks, preferably with ship captain in tow. Once they get off, though, it's clear many of the Mistral residents aren't too happy or comfortable with this many Faunus arriving at once, especially led by a former White Fang leader. They make their way through the city, planning to meet with the Mistral Council, only for some police to stop them and demand that they end their gathering. A riot nearly breaks out as the residents of the city throw out hateful slurs, some even asking if the Cowardly Lion invited the White Fang to do to Haven what they did to Beacon. Oh, the irony! Ilya then turns herself in as a White Fang operative to move the police's attention to herself, though Blake turns herself in as well to go with her, hoping she'll be able to speak with the police chief and go from there. And of course Sun throws himself in this too, because Sun just enjoys chaos. And Sun don't leave no friends behind. We cut to an interrogation room where Ilya sits by herself. She changes colors as she's super anxious and unsure of how to feel or what's going to happen, but manages to return to normal as she takes a breath to calm herself down. The police chief of Mistral enters and asks her several questions, and Ilya reveals everything that she knows about Adam's involvement at the fall of Beacon, his assassination of Sienna Khan, and the attempted assassination of the Belladonnas. She also reveals information about the planned attack on both Haven Academy and Mistral the night of the full moon, and begs the chief to believe Blake, even offering to face justice in Mistral as a bargaining chip. And that's when the chief starts laughing, freaking Ilya the hell out, till the chief says that Ilya is just as soft-hearted as the Belladonna girl said. So, turns out when Gira was the White Fang's leader, he actually managed to befriend the Mistral police chief and change his mind about the Faunus, because Gira's all about forgiveness and friendship. He basically a big teddy bear, even though he's, a cat. He's already spoken with Blake and Gira, and so they hatch a plan to scope out Haven Academy as well as the rest of the city as per the info in Ilya's scroll and what the Belladonnas found in the Albane's residence, with Ilya serving as an important role in infiltration. Ilya is unsure, but Blake encourages her and reaffirms her trust in her old friend. We then cut to the White Fang stronghold as Hazel informs Adam on the updated plan. Once Hazel's associates retrieve a special artifact from the school, they'll give Adam the signal to set off charges planted across the campus, destroying it. This sudden chaos, followed by several armed White Fang members planted throughout the city of Mistral, would send the people of Mistral into a panic, most likely drawing in massive hordes of Grimm just as the panic in Vale did before the fall of Beacon. Hazel mentions a group of huntsmen and huntresses in training who will be eliminated on the campus, and clearly wants no part in the bloodshed. He provides Adam a list of them, and when Adam recognizes Yang, along with Weiss as the Schnee the bandits promised to sell him for a public execution, Adam gladly offers to take Hazel's place. We then cut to outside Haven Academy, where Adam paces about the school's gardens, which are surrounded by a small hedge maze. Here, Adam practices his sword slices on the water lilies and lampposts. He nearly ends up killing one of the White Fang operatives as he rushes to tell Adam that they have a problem. Adam heads back into the courtyard, where he receives word that the White Fang members planted throughout Mistral have gone silent, not sending in further confirmations of their placement and preparations. And that's right when Blake, standing on the Haven rooftop, reveals herself and orders Adam to stand down. We have a bit of a battle of ideals here, where Blake argues that this terrorism is only going to hurt the Faunus of Remnant even more, while Adam argues that this city deserves to suffer for using Faunus as slave labor in the past, and for allowing discrimination against their kind even to this day. Of course, this is when the Faunus militia reveals itself, surrounding Adam's small team on all sides, followed by police airships, which ensure no Fang members escape the campus. Adam threatens to set off the charges, though Ilya kills his moment as she emerges from the shadows, having just defused the last one. But along with all of them, the police notified any available huntsmen and huntresses in the area, and this includes the students of Haven who were already in the city awaiting the start of the new year, which includes the rest of Team Sun, along with Team Auburn and any other huntsmen who have attended Haven that we're unaware of. I just really want this finale to rock, y'all. Maybe some professors, who knows. Ooh, maybe a moment for them to go, "Et tu, Leo?" Blake gives Adam one last chance to surrender, only for Adam to attack her. Fighting breaks out as Blake and Sun battle Adam, while the Faunus militia surrounds the rest of the Fang, which Ilya and Gira take care of. Inside the atrium, Ruby and Nora continue their fight with Emerald and Mercury as Yang, Oscar, and Crow deal with Hazel and Leo. They hear the commotion outside, but don't pay it much mind for now. With Weiss starting to recover, Jean continues his apparent healing while Ren joins the fight against Hazel, which prompts Nora to switch places with Yang. Nora then proceeds to be a fucking badass queen as she knocks Hazel clear through the building, catching everyone's attention. Yang spots both Adam and Blake and without any kind of warning, races to the entrance of the vault. Ruby tackles Emerald, and when Mercury grabs Yang's automail arm, she pops it off and sends him flying as she jumps into the vault. Emerald wants to follow, but Mercury asserts that they need all the help that they can get up here. Outside, having finished off the White Fang members, Gira and Ilya turn their attention to Hazel. Blake notices all of her friends over in the atrium, but when Adam tries to attack her, she dodges. Adam promises he'll leave Blake alive to watch him kill all of her friends, and Blake simply scoffs and says, "You wish." The episode begins where we left off with Cinder and Raven in the vault chamber, with the battle of the bitches ensuing as the maidens duke it out. This fight is spread throughout the episode, with little flashbacks interjected during it. The first flashback is of Raven encountering the true previous Spring Maiden after she fled Mistral. She's left unnamed, as I figured it could kinda show how little her life even means to Raven, though I did toy with the idea of naming her Catlia, which is the name of the flowers on Vernal's tattoo. Because I'm a monster. Anyways, Raven decides to leave the girl when she asks for help, pitying how meek and dainty she appears. One of the bandits with her attempts to get close to the girl, for probably obvious creepy reasons, because they're bandits, only for the girl to release her maiden powers to defend herself. Raven is in awe and simply says, "Spring." The second flashback is during a kind of training mission for the girl. Clearly not her first. Her anxiety and gentle nature makes it very difficult for her to use her powers aggressively, and so she winds up jeopardizing the mission's success. Eventually, Raven has had enough, and sometime later, she executes the girl as she cries, as she begs for mercy. We don't see the kill, but we do hear it, and it's very clear what's happened. The third and final flashback in this episode is Raven having informed Leo of the situation with the Spring Maiden, which we cut away from at the end of Chapter 7, and so they hatch a plan to continue pretending Vernal is the Spring Maiden, allowing them to use the chaos with Crow's group at Haven to escape with the Relic of Knowledge. This is Raven's only option, with her entire tribe having just been slaughtered by Cinder, and Leo reluctantly agrees. Raven then teleports back to Vernal, who's hiding in the forest. They reveal themselves to Cinder, Emerald, Mercury, and Watts, who have been searching for them. Before Cinder can strike, Raven proposes a deal where she and Vernal will join Salem's faction and hand over the relic. With some convincing, though Watts is clearly unconvinced because, he has a brain, Cinder decides to humor Raven and shakes on the deal. It's literally just to get at RWBY. It's literally just that. Back in the present, as All Things Must Die plays near the end of the Maiden's battle, Vernal shoots at Cinder, giving Raven the upper hand. She destroys Cinder's mask and sends her plummeting into the chasm below, freezing her solid. Vernal has died, and so Raven closes her eyes and steps over her because she's Raven. She approaches the vault door and opens it, revealing a strange desert-like pocket dimension inside. That's when Yang arrives in the vault, where she confronts her mother on having killed the previous Spring Maiden and risked her life and others just so she could save herself without thinking anything through. During this, Raven's powers begin to go berserk as her stress levels rise, possibly even making storm clouds and powerful winds in the vault. This all dies down when Yang says that she'll fight Salem, and it goes deathly quiet.
You don't want to do this, Yang.
Nope. But I'm gonna do it anyway.
Raven transforms into a bird and exits via a portal, leaving behind a single feather. And so Yang, wiping away a tear and trying to keep herself collected, enters the Vault of Knowledge. In the distance, however, is not the relic, but a strange oasis surrounded by palm trees. Now this episode opening I'm not too sure on, but fuck it, we're gonna go for it. We begin with the Weiss character short, complete with the glorious Weiss fight, because she is queen. Along with Path to Isolation and the Winter cameo appearance. Is this a cameo or I don't know what this is. However, we don't cut to Weiss waking up in the present, because she's not on the airship. Now, I'm not too certain on the exact imagery or transitions I want to use here, but I do know that I want it to be trippy and symbolic as shit. See, what Weiss is experiencing here is what we kids like to call a near-death experience. When you nearly die, your brain kinda goes nuts and starts going into overdrive and creepy, weird imagery, largely with stuff festering in your subconscious. It can feel almost like you're transcending reality and into the afterlife. And that's the intended effect here till Weiss hears her friends' voices, with Jean's being the loudest. And maybe throw in some Nicholas Schnee, be like, go girl. Kick your father's ass, for good measure. She approaches the light, and that's when she wakes up. Jean explains the situation as Weiss' wound has completely healed, and her aura has not only been restored, but greatly amplified. Weiss sits up, saying that while she kinda hates to admit it, she knew Jean would unlock his semblance someday, even saying she'd be proud of you. We all know who the she is, and also Weiss's best team mom. Outside, meanwhile, Blake and Sun continue their fight against Adam and manage to get the upper hand. Adam runs off into the hedge maze nearby, and despite Blake's warning, Sun goes after him. Adam nearly manages to kill Sun during this, but Blake manages to protect him, and they corner Adam near the pond in the maze's center. Adam calls them both traitors to their kind, right in time for Ilya to have a badass moment where she knocks Adam's mask off and says, "The only traitor I see is the coward hiding his face." We don't see Adam's face just yet, but Adam grabs his mask, scowls at Blake, then kicks up the water from the pond right before he escapes. They decide to let the police securing the perimeter handle Adam while they go back to defend the school. The three join Gira and the rest of Team Sun in the fight against Hazel, though right as Hazel injects himself with fire dust, he's impaled with the stinger of Weiss's Lancer summon and violently drags him back into the atrium, where Weiss stands fully recovered and ready to kick ass. Inside the atrium, the fights have rearranged themselves a bit. Again, Jean, Ruby, Ren, and Nora have surrounded Emerald and Mercury, while Leo is trying to hold his own against Crow and Oscar. Weiss and her Lancer hold their own against Hazel for a bit, though Hazel destroys the summon. Thankfully, Blake rushes in to protect Weiss, and right afterwards, Gira, Ilya, and Team Sun follow to provide further support. With this, Neptune, Sage, and Scarlet move to guard Team Junior, Crow, and Oscar as they rest. Ruby, Weiss, and Blake handle Emerald and Mercury, while Gira, Sun, and Ilya fight Hazel. As Leo's aura is broken, he retreats from the atrium, especially ashamed when his own students look on disappointed that he's apparently on the villain's side. We cut to the scene where Leo rushes to Pac, only for Salem to kill him via the Seagrim, and this scene is largely unchanged, since I really enjoy the way it was originally constructed. Adam, meanwhile, runs through the city trying to escape as he's pursued by the police. He takes them down as he rushes it into the wilderness, even taking down a police airship before succeeding in his retreat. Ozpin asserts himself and takes control of Oscar, warning that they'll need to secure the relic before it's too late, as Cinder has been down there for most of the fight. Crow moves to head down himself, only to be held back by his exhaustion and minor injuries. Ruby and Weiss decide to go down and help Yang, and while Blake is clearly anxious about whatever awaits them, and is still very much confused on whatever's going on, she agrees to go with them, grabbing Yang's automail arm. And so while Neptune, Sage, and Scarlet hold off Emerald and Mercury, cute little iceberg interaction, Ruby uses her semblance to take herself, Weiss, and Blake flying down the vault chamber entrance, laughing the entire way down cause she crazy. We then cut to Yang walking through the vault's interior as she approaches the strange oasis. She kneels and touches the water, realizing it's simply a mirage when her hand remains dry. And so, taking a breath, she walks right into the water, finding a secret path leading into a deep ruin. You can take a guess what this is kinda meant to be based on. And once she enters the ruin, we cut to black as the episode ends. Now, compared to all the previous chapters, this one is probably going to be the most vague with room for future changes, mainly because it's essentially an entire new plot focused primarily on retrieving the Relic of Knowledge, the aftermath of the Battle of Haven, and Team RWBY's awkward reunion. We begin with Ruby and Weiss having tried to summarize the entire situation to Blake, and while Blake is still very confused and a little unnerved, she clearly wants to help and make up for lost time. With Vernal laying dead, the girls presume that Cinder is already inside the vault along with Raven and Yang, and head inside ready for a fight. Inside the ruins, Yang endures several physical trials without her automail arm, which test her mettle. She struggles, especially with her PTSD, but manages to fight through. Eventually, she comes to an Alban salt plain, where she's subjected to several intense mirages of all her insecurities. Adam, Raven, Blake, Ruby, the whole shabam. Ruby, Weiss, and Blake manage to get through those same physical trials, only to be forcefully separated. We focus for a bit on Ruby, who sees a mirage of Team Stark, who all vanish one by one. She rushes to her mother as she hears her hum, crying when she vanishes in a whirlwind of white rose petals. Weiss, meanwhile, is faced with a reflection of herself, a sort of dark Weiss that embodies everything she's hated in herself up until this point. She battles this reflection, managing to defeat it, and I'll let you piece together the symbolism on your own. She then hears Ruby crying and helps helps her break through the mirage, and once they defeat a dark Ruby embodying Ruby's doubts, they together resolve to find Blake and Yang. Blake, meanwhile, doesn't see Adam, but rather a mirage of Yang who behaves like Adam, with perpetually red eyes. This version of Yang manifests Blake's worst fears of how Yang will react to her return and embodies the self-hatred that she's tried to quell with Sun's help. Blake apologizes profusely, but the mirage isn't conquered till she realizes that what she's doing is only making the situation worse, keeping herself from being able to talk to Yang and remedy the problem. The dark Yang turns into a dark version of Blake before fading away. Or shattering, whichever one's cooler. With that, she finds Yang battling a dark version of herself just as the others had. Maybe a reference to a certain Volume 4 opening. The Dark Yang tries to convince normal Yang to take her anger out on Blake. Blake simply talks to Yang, admitting that what she did was wrong and that she's incredibly sorry, and that she doesn't expect Yang to forgive her. Our Yang looks like she's about to attack Blake, only to turn on her heel and destroy the dark version of herself, shattering her. Once Yang helps Blake up, that's when Ruby and Weiss find them. It's awkwardly silent as no one is sure what to say. But that's when Ruby spots a blue light in the distance, the Relic of Knowledge. Yang is the one to take the relic, and when the others prepare to leave, Yang simply stares at the relic concerning Blake. Blake asks her what's wrong, and Yang says that her own mother left her for years and risked her life just for this object. Yang sobs, and the other members of Team RWBY kneel around her for a sad group hug as they try to comfort Yang. The atrium fight is mostly concluded by this point, with Hazel, Emerald, and Mercury completely exhausted and surrounded on all sides. To recap the good guys up here, it's Crow, Oscar/Ozpin, Team Junior, Team Sun, Gira, and Ilya. Emerald says that Cinder will be back soon to destroy them all and burn Haven to the ground, just in time for Team RWBY to rise up on the platform with Yang holding the Relic of Knowledge. Emerald has her little breakdown where she creates a hallucination of Salem, which everyone sees, and Hazel and Mercury take the opportunity to escape with an unconscious Emerald. They're able to escape since most of the police are currently dealing with the White Fang in the city. Everyone is in shock of what they witnessed, especially the ones who know literally nothing about the main plot. Blake has a brief moment with her parents as Kali arrives, where she tries to explain what's happened to them. Ilya then asks if the girls she was with are the teammates she's been talking about, and cue a little cute crush moment for Ilya on Weiss, which is hilarious because, you know, she's hated the Schnees for most of her life. Rainbow snow for life. Yang hands off the Relic of Knowledge to Crow, not revealing that her mother is the Spring Maiden, and simply saying that she and Cinder had disappeared. Blake introduces her family to all her friends, cue another cute rainbow snow moment, and Nora gives Blake an insanely tight hug. Yang is clearly still unsure about how to feel, and seeing how exhausted everyone is, Crow decides that they should probably all go home. Of course, it's never quiet, because we have a cute little reunion party at the Ranger house, where we get to see some interactions we weren't treated to in the show proper. Maybe including cute little baby Blake stories from Gira and Kali to embarrass her, and some bromance moments between Yang and Sun, because we all know they would be best buds. Sunny Peas! Blake still clearly feels guilty about leaving, and Weiss tries to keep her company. And they find it funny just how much they've changed since they first met back in Volume 1. Though when Nora drags Weiss over to help Jean brag about discovering his semblance, Blake decides to head outside for some air. Ruby notices this and follows Blake, and they have a conversation about all the Salem and the relic stuff. Blake admits that she wishes she had Ruby's strength, as even after the fall of Beacon, Ruby had the strength to keep moving forward and fight to stop Salem, while Blake just ran to her parents and abandoned her friends when they needed her most. Ruby, however, says that while it wasn't the best of decisions, and it would have been immensely better for Blake to tell them where she was going, Ruby also notes that she always had a feeling Blake would come back, but only when she was ready, and that what matters is that they're all back together now. And right on cue, Weiss and Yang head outside to meet with them. Sun just got done telling them all about the events that went down in Menagerie, and Blake apologizes for everything, again. Yang tries to mimic Weiss's little I don't want to hear it thing from Volume 1, but stops herself deciding she sounds too bitchy.
Hey!
Yang admits she isn't sure how she feels, and that if she can forgive Blake completely right now, but that she's willing to try, and for right now, that's enough. It's then when Crow, Oscar, and Team Junior head outside with some news from Ozpin. Their next step, now that they can't close the Vault of Knowledge and with Haven Academy compromised, is to bring the Relic of Knowledge to Atlas. Cue Weiss wanting to die. This would require a little tweaking to the flashback scene in Volume 6, but fuck it, I don't care. And the post-credit scene has two parts, the first of which is the same with Ty noticing Raven in bird form flying around Patch, though Zwei is present to growl at the stupid bitch.
You ruined everything. You stupid. Yes, I deserve this.
Raven then visits Summer's grave. Ty approaches and says, "Your bonds go beyond death," so why use my portal? Implying that Raven wanted Ty to take notice. And with that, the volume is done. Okay. Scratch on that previous post-credit scene, y'all. I came up with a better one recently, and we're going with it. That Ty scene is right before the credits. Let's roll. So the post-credit scene takes place in Mistral, sometime after the Battle of Haven. A few days, a week, I don't know. But it's being reported on the news who are listing all of the known perpetrators, including Cinder Fall. A strange, mysterious girl takes note of this, possibly to the dismay of people trying to get around her. Maybe she shish kebabs one with her parasol, I'm not sure, but it would be cool. A parasol? Are you implying? Yes, I am, because once she hears Cinder Fall's name listed, her eyes change from whatever the fuck color they are now to their usual pink and brown. Yes, bitches! Yes. That's it. That's all I got. Okay? It's very rough. I just came up... So, yeah, there's my rewrite of Volume 5. And before anyone asks, I have no plans to majorly overhaul Volume 6, unless I write my own version of the story from the ground up, which, knowing me, yeah, I probably will. But I actually have no major issues with Volume 6. It's great as it is, and I would not change a thing. Okay, maybe a little tweak here and there with the Oz and Salem origin, some pacing stuff, additional story beats, but nothing majorly different. Oh, but I probably would change the whole Adam and Bumblebee thing. There's just not enough punching Adam in the teeth and breaking his ribs. Oh, and Blake and Yang need to make out in front of that waterfall. Preferably over Adam's corpse. Because, suck it bitches, my people can be main characters. And Adam's overrated. He always was. I don't brew the tea, I just serve it. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to subscribe and ring that bell for notifications because YouTube hates creators. Also, be sure to check out my other videos, including video essays and reviews, and my latest new series where I document the Winx Club franchise and what a clusterfuck it is. Like, holy shit, guys, this show has like 5 dubs. 5. And it has died in the US twice. That's kind of impressive. If you would like to further support the channel, then besides checking out my other content, you can join the lovely patron family over on Patreon, or check out the links to my upcoming book in the description below. I'm the Unicorn of War, and this has been a shit show.